So recently, this lady's health and care worker visa was denied. This is after she had received her COS from her sponsor and everything. So apparently, between the time that she received the COS and the time that she applied for the visa, the sponsor lost their sponsor license. Hence, now the COS was no longer valid, so her visa was denied. Now she has a refusal on her record by no fault of hers. But that is not even an issue, right? There are other people that I know who are currently in safe houses in the UK because their visa sponsor, who was their employer, lost their sponsor license and could no longer sponsor them. So the UK Home Office gave them a safe house and told them that you guys have to stay here for a period of time. If you don't get another job, you'll have to be sent back to your home countries respectively. And the case is even sadder, you know, for people that were working for this employer, they worked for a while, especially for some of them who had to pay money to be able to come to the UK. So for people like that, they come here and then after working for this employer for let's say 2 months, then the employer comes to tell them that unfortunately we can no longer sponsor you because we have lost our sponsorship license. So if you're a foreign personnel and you require sponsorship to work in the UK, you'll have to go look for another employer. And sometimes they are not told on time, so they have just a few days left to find another employer, or they'll become illegal immigrants if they continue to stay in the UK. And there are some people that stayed regardless after their employer lost their sponsorship license and now they become illegal immigrants. The case is really sad, and today I'm going to show you in this video list of sponsors whose sponsor licenses have been revoked and how to find sponsors who remain with a visa sponsorship license. And I'm also going to show you what exactly you should do should you find yourself in this situation. So if you're interested, stay tuned. Stop that. So hi guys, today I have promised to speak so slowly as you guys wanted. This is not me at all. In fact, I'm even feeling sleepy because I'm talking slow. But for those who missed the way I used to talk like very fast, please, you can always go into settings and then change the playback speed from normal to times 1.2. Alright, so for those who are seeing me for the first time, my name is Nanelle Griselda. On this channel, I talk about nesting, I talk about migration, I talk about opportunities for people to relocate abroad and life in the UK as well as immigrants in general. So if these are topics that interest you, please consider subscribing. So first of all, for those who are confused about this topic in the first place, let me quickly explain. So for a company in the UK to recruit somebody from, let's say, Africa, or to recruit somebody from Asia, or to recruit somebody from anywhere else in the world aside the UK, that company requires what we call a sponsorship license, okay? So if this company has a sponsorship license, then they have the right to recruit foreign personnel. But there are rules and regulations governing this. If an employer breaks any of these rules and, you know, an investigation is done and they are found wanting, their sponsorship license can be revoked or suspended. So when that happens, that means they can no longer employ somebody who is not from the UK. So that is how this thing happens. And over the last couple of months, I'm sure you guys have seen so many headlines. Let me read this one from BBC News. It says, care firm has overseas worker license revoked by Home Office. This one also says, nearly 100 social care businesses lose license to recruit overseas workers. And this was in November 2023. So as at that time, almost 100 companies in the UK had lost their sponsor licenses. Someone might ask, how can they lose it? So one, there are rules and regulations that govern recruiting overseas workers. And if as a company, you break any of these rules and then you are reported and the investigations are done and they realize that you are guilty, your sponsor license can be revoked. So for the group of people that were in the safe house, they were working as domiciliary workers. So apparently this employer was paying them way little than a minimum wage. And then to recruit a person from overseas, there's an amount of money that you should be paying this person. We call this a minimum salary threshold. So when this person reported to one of the patients that she was taking care of, the patient also phoned the Home Office and reported the employer because the patient said, this person is taking so good care of me and you're paying this person, let's say £5 an hour, which is not right, which is illegal. So after this, the patient reported them, then they mentioned the name of the company, they investigated the company, and lots of other employees were going through the same thing. So now I think the employer was arrested and then they kept all the other employees in the safe house, blah, blah, blah. There are some people also who the Home Office realized that they didn't have vacancies for people. They were just charging people money to give them COs, and the people come to the UK and become stranded. So if you break any of the rules governing recruitment, or you don't even pay the fee that you're supposed to pay, then you can be found wanting and your sponsor license can be revoked or suspended. And the people who suffer most are the employees of these people who have left their home countries to come and work here, and then they find themselves in this situation. Because the problem is you have only up to 60 days to be in the UK if your employer loses their sponsorship license. And this is not my words, these are the words of the Home Office. Okay, but before I go ahead and read it, there's a website called worksponsors.co.uk and they have published a list of companies who have allegedly lost their sponsor license. This is how the website looks like. So if you go to the first part, you see that they have arranged the list in alphabetical order, okay, so that it will be easy for you to look for an employer. Okay, so I can see 7 Even Management Limited, I can see A to Z Retail Limited, Arona Clinical Limited, Airport Travel Plus Limited, blah 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 blah, and then you can go on and on. So all the people who have lost their sponsor license are here allegedly. Okay, so this is a very short list that you can use to find. By the way, this video is proudly sponsored by Lemfi. So for those of you who are hearing Lemfi for the first time, Lemfi is an international money transfer company that allows you to send money from the UK, from Canada and the US to over 10 different African countries. You can send money to Ghana, to Nigeria, to Cameroon, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Benin, Tanzania, Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda at zero transfer charges, zero fees, nothing at all. And on top of that, they have the best rate on the market. Compare Lemfi's rate to any other app, you know, they are always the best. And so I recommend Lemfi if you're in the UK, you're in Canada or the US, and you want to transfer money to friends and family in any of these countries that I have mentioned. Okay, as well, if you use the code NANEL, you get £15 cashback on your first transfer above £100. Okay, and then you can also always generate your own referral link and then send to friends and family. So when they use your link, you get a bonus as well from Lemfi. Lemfi is the best, and ever since I discovered them, that's what my friends and my family have been using. Thank you, Lemfi, for sponsoring today's video. But there's another way that you can actually use. So that one is published by the gov.uk. So I'll leave the link in the description as well. That will take you to this website where you can see all the companies in the UK that have a valid sponsor license to sponsor a foreign personnel or to recruit a foreign personnel into the UK. So as you can see, that's how it looks like. So if, let's say, a company promises you to give you a job, you can go on ahead and see if they indeed have a sponsor license. Okay. Yeah, it's a very tall list, and it has all the companies that have permission to recruit foreign personnel and they have a valid sponsor license. Okay, let me read the rules for employees if your visa sponsor loses their license. It says you will have to leave your job and leave the UK if your employer loses their sponsor license unless you make a new visa application to stay in the UK. You could also be affected if their license is suspended or if they are taking over or they don't renew their license. So if you're already in the UK, when your sponsor loses their license, your certificate of sponsorship is automatically cancelled. Your visa is now limited to 60 days or however long you have left on the visa if it was already less than 60 days, right? And then you have to leave your job and leave the UK unless you make a new visa application within that time. And then it says if you are involved in the reasons why your sponsor lost their license, your visa will be withdrawn and you have to leave the UK immediately. So for example, you know you're not supposed to pay for your own COS, and then you paid for your own COS and then you were caught. You will have to leave the UK immediately. For you don't even have the 60 days grace period, and then the employer will also lose their license. But if you were not involved, then you have 60 days. So you have only 60 days to find another employer who has sponsor license to recruit you, or you can switch to another visa category. Let's say within that time you get married and you become somebody's dependent, you have the right to stay in the UK. Or let's say you apply for a university program in any of the universities in the UK, you can apply for another visa and be successful and stay in the UK, right? So there are a list of visa types that you can switch to whilst you are still in the UK. Check eligibility for visas so that you can find out. Okay, for some people as well, their sponsor's license has not been revoked, but it's only been suspended. So for those whose sponsor's license has only been suspended, this is what you should do. If you've already traveled to the UK but you have not started work, you can start work. Okay, if you're already working, you can keep working. But if you've applied to extend your visa, your application won't be processed until the suspension ends. My advice is that always check before you even apply for your visa. Just check just in case that your sponsor still has their license. If you're being recruited by somebody like the NHS or any big A-rated sponsor, is very unlikely. But with all those domiciliary care companies, agencies and small care homes, is highly possible. So always cross-check before you apply for your visa. Okay, even after you've gotten your certificate of sponsorship. Okay, it says if you're outside the UK and you've applied for your visa will be refused so far as your sponsor's license has been suspended. If you have a visa but you haven't traveled to the UK, your visa will be cancelled. You won't be allowed to enter if you travel to the UK. So before you travel, you have to make sure that you have checked that your sponsor still has their license intact. Okay, other than that, at the airport, at the immigration, you will not be allowed to enter the UK. Meanwhile, you're already in the UK. In fact, you're at through, but the immigration officer will not let you enter. Okay, so bear this in mind. It's very important. So for those whose sponsor's license has been revoked completely, the sponsor has lost their license, if you've applied for your visa, it will be refused because now your sponsor has lost their license. So you have to check and see whether their sponsor license has been suspended or their sponsor license has been revoked completely. Okay, it's more serious if it's been revoked. If your sponsor's company has been taken over and they don't renew their license, your visa will be limited to only 60 days or however long you have on your visa. So for instance, for me, when I came, the company that I was working for is not the same company that I'm with. Okay, so my company was bought over by another company. So if that company did not have a sponsor license, that means I'll be found in the situation. So they sent us letters to explain to us that you don't have to do anything. We will speak to the home office. All of you bring your BRPs, all of you bring your passports, and let's see. So for us, they did it at the top level. So they had to make sure they had sponsor license because now the company that gave me the COS, they were no longer my employers because they've sold their company to another company. Okay, so sometimes it's by no fault of yours, or sometimes it's not through any illegal thing. It's as simple as them selling the business to another employer or another business. You understand? It says if your employer does not renew their sponsor license following the takeover of your employer's business, your new employer doesn't apply for sponsor license within 28 days, you will be found wanting. So if you're not getting another employer to give you a certificate of sponsorship within that 60 days period, I would advise you go back home. But if within that 60-day period, let's say you are able to apply for a program in any of the universities and you are granted admission, you can apply for a visa. Other than that, just go home, go back to wherever you came from and take your time to reapply and then come. You don't want to have the tag of overstay on your visa. You don't want that. Also, if let's say within that time as you were legal, you use that opportunity to, let's say, apply for, let's say, a US visa. Usually they'll give you 5 years, or you get another country's visa. During that period, as you are waiting, you have 60 days, right? You can, travel to any of these countries and then go and cool off and start reapplying again and then come back legally, okay? So that maybe you don't want to go back to your home country for whatever reason known to you. You can do all that, apply for a student visa or switch to any other kind of visa that you're eligible for. Do not overstay. That's the last thing that you want to do. So ladies and gentlemen, this is my advice to you, okay? You do not want an overstay on your record. It's bad, not for the UK alone, but anytime you're making any visa application, you will be asked. And it is by no fault of yours. You came here because you had a job. You did not enter here illegally. You are a legal migrant, okay? So do not turn that legal thing to become illegal when it's not even your fault. Just go back and then reapply properly. This is my advice to you. If you have any other advice that I forgot to mention, kindly leave it in the comment section.